Thank you for staying with us. As the leadership of President Muhammadu Buhari winds down, many groups and experts are reviewing the steps and strategies he used in his fight against terrorism. The latest report from the Global Terrorism Index puts Nigeria at the 8th position. Although this is an improvement from 2022, where the country was ranked 6th, it still leaves room for much more to be done by the incoming government. During the almost 8 years of President Buhari's tenure, he reviewed the national counter-terrorism strategy created by the National Action Plan for Preventing and Countering Violent Extremism, amongst others, to fight terrorism in Nigeria. Despite all of these, many Nigerians are still victims of extremist groups like Boko Haram, IPOB, amongst others. But joining us via Zoom to assess President Buhari's fight against terrorism is Preventive Terrorism Consultant and President of Africa Security Forum, Temitope Olodo. Thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast.
Thank you for having me.
Good morning.
Right. Now, what's your assessment thus far when you place this side by side, the president's performance with regards to addressing matters of terrorism, kidnapping, and all of it? How would you evaluate the president's effort?
Thank you so much for having me. I think we need to be honest with ourselves because I'll use the hamburger principle. We must thank the president for some of the legislative provisions that he has brought on board to help to reduce violent extremism in the country. About 8 bills, including the reforming of the Police Act, Correctional Service Act, Crime Proceed Act. Those kind of bills will help to reduce terrorism. But if we want to be honest with ourselves, the only person to thank or some of the people to thank for the current reduction in criminality or violence extremism in Nigeria is even include ASWAP. Because ASWAP took it upon themselves to drive into the Nigerian territory, to go to where no man can go to, and take away the leader of Boko Haram. And because it's the leader of Boko Haram that is chiefly responsible for 50% of most of the violence extremism. And you could see, as a result of them taking him out, the violence extremism have reduced a little. And even some of the successes that the military are claiming now of 10,000, 15,000 people coming out to give themselves up are members of the Boko Haram who do not have any leader anymore and have decided to, just give up. Now, the bottom line is that the parents of Lai Shaib, who has spent 1,880 days in captivity, will not be thankful to President Buhari. The parents or the family members of the Chibok girls, who you were speaking about earlier, who have died, some of the parents have died, will not be happy with President Muhammadu Buhari. Of course, we thank President Muhammadu Buhari for some of the weapons that they got, but it's not about weapons. And it's about misplaced priority, as far as I'm concerned. I'll give you a classic example before you shut me up. The fact is that we heard yesterday of the millions that Nigeria is spending on getting scanners for train stations. I work in the security space. If one of your viewers right now could mention any country in the world where they put scanner before you get on an interstate train, I'm happy to give them money. I've been to New York. I've been in the UK presently. It doesn't happen because the attack on the trains were not from inside the station. It's not people that came from inside the train that caused the attack. There were people from outside. So if you've used that money, if you've used that money to put people on the track, to put security people on the track, work with private security companies to work on that track to make sure that nobody is going into those secured areas, then we'll have better success. So they're wasting money putting scanners in that place. I'm not saying that it's not necessary. I'm saying that it's not the most priority that they need to do. What they need to do is secure the rail line. And it shows you that the kind of people that are dealing with the security management have a problem. And that's the area where we need to focus on. And I'm hoping the new administration coming in will focus on some of the parameters that is used to measure those rankings and use them to determine how they tackle with it. I'll give you a classic example again. If they do exactly what the vice president was doing on easing business, so they picked on each of the rankings issues and then they start tackling it. That is the way they need to deal with terrorism. If they do it that way, you will see that terrorism will reduce drastically because of it. But what they are doing now is firefighting.
Okay. Now, you mentioned earlier that it's ISWAP's killing of the leader of Boko Haram is responsible for the level of what we have seen with regards to the Global Terrorism Index, how Nigeria's terrorism index has dropped by 2 points. But then again, in that same report, it is saying that ISWAP contributed about 36% to the level of terrorism that we are witnessing in Nigeria. So how do you put that?
The fact is that we need to understand that we do not have a containment strategy. When I mean containment strategy, the military are doing a good work in terms of those men with those boots on the ground that actually making the ultimate sacrifice. And I salute them for the work they are doing day and night to go after those terrorists and get rid of those ones that need to be got rid of. We must not take it away from them. But the truth is that 5% out of 100%. If you look at most of the videos that were played, we're not seeing many videos now. Most of the videos were done by Shekau. And it was those guys that went to go and pick out Shekau. They even when they came into the Nigerian territory, did what they want to do and work out, and nobody stopped them in the middle of it. Even though we have drones and we have all the planes that we spend billions to go and buy from America, that aside. But what I'm trying to say is that we can't prefer one terrorist group to another. But the truth of the fact is that if Shekau was not taken out of the picture by another terrorist, we will not be talking about the drop in points, because these guys are still killing. And even ASWAP need to be taken out, of course. But we should understand that the reason why there's a reduction in our terrorism ranking is because of what is happening in Burkina Faso and Mali, where most of those guys have shifted to. We should remember that most of even Boko Haram members, some of them were even trained in Libya. So it's a transnational terrorist group, like President Goodluck Jonathan called them West African terrorist group, which I totally agree with, because they cut across not just Nigeria alone, but other places. And that's the reason why the multinational task force that Nigeria was part of, which was trying to deal with it, was one of the very good ways in which to deal with it, which is inter-country approach or transnational approach to tackle terrorism, because we've opened the door to terrorism, and as a result, we're dealing with it. But the problem I'm trying to say again is that it's about strategic management of terrorism, which is what we don't do very well. Because I'll give you a classic example. We talk about the Global Terrorism Index, but very few people talk about the Global Peace Index, which placed Nigeria between 143 to 148. Nigeria will have made 13 billion annually if we don't have crisis in our country. At the moment, over a period of 11 years, 1.3 trillion have been lost to violence. We are creating violence entrepreneurs or conflict entrepreneurs, rather than creating wealth for our youth who are so angry with the whole system. They can't get jobs, so they are going out to get involved in violence. So we need to change our strategy. I'm hoping that this new coming president will do what others have not done, and that is to create a presidential committee to tackle violence extremism, and it should be filled with civilians, top people from America, from Nigeria, people that are experts, who could give a civilian approach, a non-kinetic approach to tackling violence extremism. We used to say it before, but the military thought they know it all. But now, we the armchair generals, who have been telling them that what they are doing need to be improved, are now looking at them and smiling. Of course, we are not smiling because we are happy with what is happening, but because we are saying, we told you so. Because there needs to be a different approach to the way they are dealing with terrorism in Nigeria. And they cannot do it the way they are doing it. They need to change it. If the new president comes in and says that he wants to continue with this same military and this same police that we have to deal with it, good luck to him. I can tell you now, he will not succeed. But if he brings in a new approach and put in new interventions, then we will see terrorism reduced to the lowest level, and many Nigerians will be happy, and prosperity will come to Nigeria.
All right. You mentioned the different kind of weapons that were acquired by Nigeria at the time. In fact, specifically the Super Tucano, because of the message around it and how it was passed on to Nigerians, the expectation was that the moment the Super Tucanos arrived Nigeria, it was going to wipe out terrorism, wipe out armed robbery, wipe out kidnapping, as the case may be. That was what was on the mind of an average Nigerian. Of course, those who are not knowledgeable about how these things work. We've also seen at different times where military generals will come, even set dates that by the end of so date and so month, terrorism will be a thing of the past. We've seen all of those. Yet we're still here talking about kidnapping, talking about some of those. As much as it's not as bad when it comes to the issue of bombings that we used to have in 2014 and 2015. But when it comes to the average Nigerian, they have been disappointed by this rhetoric for so long. And when they say, let us assist government with information, assist government in any way you can, how do you think that the average Nigerian trusts government to give information to assist in those areas that we still see terrorism here and there?
Many Nigerians have done a lot to help government by giving information, and some of them have got burnt in the process. That being said, I would like to use this medium to say, please, please, please continue to support those people at the War Theater. Most of them have left their families, to be able to go to Borno and some other places. Because what we've seen under this government is that as they are quenching one fire, other fires are erupting. So we've seen violence extremism spread across the country, and we've seen the military thin out. I've always advocated that I wanted a stronger police force that can deal with violence extremism. And I want a situation where we are proactively dealing with violence extremism. So one of the things I have to shout out to the government and appreciate, but I need them to do more, is teaching security education in schools, because that helps to reduce violence extremism in the schools, so that these youth are not growing up to become violent individuals. So I have to give it a shout to them. And most private schools now are teaching security education in schools, and I think we need to encourage that, and they're teaching it up to WAEC level, and we need to even teach it in universities. That being said, when you look at it, the Nigerian police created a police university, and I was thinking, wow, this is brilliant. And what are they teaching? Physics, chemistry, and biology. Can you imagine? When they are meant to be teaching what they are, like what they are meant, where others are teaching. I can tell you now, I have in my house a son that is learning a BSc in counter-terrorism in the UK at degree level. We're not doing that. And all the kids that are learning criminology, we're not giving them jobs. They will go to the police, they will do their attached IT, and then they kick them out and say, no, we can't offer you a job. These are kids, new kids that could come up with new ideas. I have lots of them that are mentors, yet they can't get a job within the police or the military. And that's the problem we have. The system is too rigid to allow people to come in. If you look at Nigerian military, the UK military, for example, if you want to join the UK military as an intelligence officer today, voluntary, you could join it. The Nigerian military, you can't join it. It's difficult. They are so rigid. They are still operating in the 9th century, recruiting cooks and things. That is not what, I'm not saying that is not important. What I'm saying is that there are new children on the block, children that think faster than old men like us, that can come up with new ideas that could deal with this. But if you just want to keep it among generals that left the job 10 years ago, that don't even know how a drone operates, then good luck to you. And I'm hoping that the new president coming in will think strategically and bring in new fresh blood into the system, civilians that could help. I'm not saying get rid of the National Security Advisor, leave them to continue to do their traditional role, but bring in people just like you've done with economics, just like you've done with terrorism, with what do you call it? Corruption. You created a presidential committee to advise you on corruption. Why can't you do the same for the counterterrorism? Create a group like that and bring in best hands from around the world who will advise you. That is advisory. Only advise you. So the military will give you advice, but these people will also tell you, Mr. President, if you look at these parameters, if you do this, you'll be able to change this. And I think that is the way forward, because all these buying weapons, the weapons will not really help. You need people that you could drop from the sky into a particular area and that can destroy things, destroy those, calculatively destroy those enemies in those areas, not just throw bombs and destroy both the civilians living there and everybody and call them collaterals of war. No, we don't need that in Nigeria. We're hoping this new president will change it. Because at the end of the day, in 2015, Nigeria became a founding member of an Islamic military counterterrorism coalition. Where is the benefit of that? And people like me mentioned it, but we were shot down. Oh, don't say that. It's housed in Saudi Arabia with all the Muslim countries coming together to look at terrorism. And I said, that will not help us, because that is not what we need. What we need is a local solution to address these things, and we've not done it. Let's look at what Saudi Arabia is doing differently. Let's look at what Morocco is doing differently. These are examples, and people have written papers on it. In fact, even within the military, a lot of them have been sent to Santos and other areas who have written papers on how to address the issue of violence extremism in Nigeria. But what are those papers doing? Gathering dust in cupboards and libraries across Nigeria. That is the sad story of our fight against terrorism.
All right, let me take you back to the Global Terrorism Index Report, a closer look at the breakdown of groups contributing to the number that we're witnessing in Nigeria. And the report said about 44% was not attributed to any group when you take a closer look at that report. And I am wondering, how do we strategically address a matter where we have 44% not attributed to any group? We don't know who those persons who are contributing to the matters of terrorism are, yet we want to address it. How do we go about it?
Unfortunately, we have a lot of ungoverned spaces, and terrorism is happening there. So there are groups that are unknown to us, splinter groups that will come out of another main group. So even though there's a lot of people surrendering, there are some hardened people who will not surrender, and they'll start their own little clique of maybe 10 or 20 or 100, and they will continue to create terror. And that is part of the challenges that you face when you left your door open to terrorism. But there are ways to intervene and address those things, and those are things that will be done by experts, people like myself who worked in that field, who knows about it. But we are civilians, we are not military. The military will use kinetic approach to deal with it, which is fire for fire. But people like us will say, you know what, let's sit back and let's look at this theater of war and say, okay, where are all these killing happening? Killing is happening in Niger State. How do we address it? How can we reduce the killing in Niger State? We can isolate Niger State or a block of states, Kaduna, which is close to Niger State, and some other countries, block them out and say this is the way we're going to deal with them. And in that way, we could cut off the head of the snake and actually deal with all the other remnants underneath. Nigeria is not using that approach, unfortunately. And that is where I'm saying that the military is thinly spread out and doing a lot of things, and I appreciate them. I love them for the work they're doing, so I want them to know. I salute them every day, and I pray for them every day. But the bottom line is this is not a work for the military alone. It involves the use of, even some of the people that have surrendered, actionable intelligence should be coming from them, which we can use to be able to address violence extremism. But we've not heard of that lately. We know 10,000 people were taken, but 10,000 people within 2 months, we've not heard about government actually going out and being able to deal with a lot of things. If you are taking intelligence from 10,000 people, wow, that's a lot of people.
Right.
That means that those intelligence should be solid.
Right, we need to quickly go on a commercial break. When we return, we'll continue this conversation. Just stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. Before we went on the break, we were speaking with the Preventive Terrorism Consultant and President of Africa Security Forum, Temitope Olodo, on President Muhammadu Buhari's effort at tackling terrorism in the country. Now, Temitope, there's the aspect of fifth columnists undermining the effort of government. Recall that former President Goodluck Jonathan had said that there were some persons who were supporting Boko Haram that were in his government. Now, government, like you rightly pointed before we went on the break, has done so much, putting so much effort at addressing this matter, yet we are not getting the result because there's also the aspect of fifth columnists. How should perhaps the incoming administration begin to look at this aspect to addressing whatever effort they would be making?
Thank you so much. I think I should start because I don't want the Buharis and others to say I'm attacking their president. No, I love President Buhari. I met him personally before the election, before the 2015, before he won the election, and I gave him a blueprint of what he could do to improve violence extremism in Nigeria, and I've always appreciated the president for what he does. However, I think it's important to highlight that the president have done a lot, but there's still a lot that needs to be done, and this is where the new president coming in to change the approach. One of the challenges with fifth columnists is that they are always insiders, and the way to deal with insiders is how other countries look at what the Americans have done. Recently, there was a leaked document. They didn't just say document was leaked, thank you so much, it's not like that, damage control. They went to source out who leaked the document because they have control and they could tell who did it. And the picture of that individual is now all over the news. And that person, of course, like other people that have done similar activities, will face the law. So fifth columnists are always there. When I was in the Office for Security and Counterterrorism, I had to go through DV clearance, which is top secret. And you have to do this clearance. In Nigeria, unfortunately, I don't know, and I think we mentioned it earlier during our last broadcast and conversation on this, we don't know what kind of security clearance that these people have to information. Because if information is closely contained within certain group and only given to certain group, then and you are managing who has access to information, then that will also help to improve your success. So one of the things that I think Mr. President needs to really look at or advice is traditional security apparatus to deal with is the issue of information management. So they need to create a kind of system that we have abroad, which is, you have certain clearance for certain level of information that people should have access to, and those information should be controlled. But if we continue to use yahoo.com, Gmail, then we have a serious problem, which, of course, we've seen some of them are still using up to now. Apart from that, like I mentioned earlier, I think the new president also needs to identify what are the 10 violent acts that is being committed in Nigeria at the moment, and it's increasing our ranking in terms of global terrorism and reducing peace in the country. When you highlighted kidnapping, adoption, rituals, and you start identifying how to deal with it, that's where the Civilian Non-Kinetic Presidential Advisory Committee will come in. The NSA is too overstretched to be able to do this thing, and it's an ex-general. Generals think the same way. Whether you take them out of uniform or put them in uniform, they will always think that way. You need people that don't think that way, that think strategically. And when you start looking at it in terms of violence, what kind of violence and how do we deal with it, you find out that things will reduce drastically because government will be able to come up with innovative approaches and ideas. Australia is doing something. What are they doing differently? This is where our civil service will have been of help because these people will sit under the civil service and will be directed by a permanent secretary, and they will be providing advice to the president. So that is the way we'll be able to deal with violence. But if Mr. President, President-elect, decide to follow the same approach and say, oh, don't listen to those boys that are shouting on TV, believe you me, in 5 years' time, 7 years' time, we'll still be talking about violence extremism, and many people will still die sadly. But if there's anything President Buhari can do before leaving office, if there's any advice, I would say call the parents of Laisha on the phone and apologize to them for not giving them back their daughter after 1,880 days. The girl has given birth to 2 children, and the girl refused to renounce her religion. Of course, religion should not be the reason why you should call, but call and apologize for not being able to give them back their daughter. And create a special group apart from the military that deal with people that are kidnapped by terrorists. Because I made it clear then, and I've done it on your platform before, that the McCain family, their child was taken in Spain. When she was taken in Spain, the Metropolitan Police have a pot of money for some detectives that go around looking for that child up to today. So why is it that we can't do that in Nigeria? You know, people are kidnapped, people are killed, 50 people are killed, and yet the flag is still flying in Asurok. But when one general, former general dies, or one attorney general dies, you drop the flag for them. So what kind of society are you creating? Or what are you telling Nigerians? That one life is better than the other? Every Nigerian matters. Every Nigerian life matters, and we need to start treating Nigeria with the value that they deserve. And that is the reason why this new president coming in must take terrorism seriously, and he should not use all this, I will deal with terrorism in 100 days, I will deal with it. Just say, I'm bringing in the best hands, which we know you normally do. Bring in the best mind to come and help you to deal with terrorism. Don't rely on the military alone. If that is any advice I will give to Asiwaju.
All right. We have seen at different times when the average Nigerian security agent, be it military or police or secret service, when they embark on any mission abroad, we see how they come back with all of the medals and all the laurels and all the commendation and awards. But when it comes back home, it is totally a different ball game. But you made reference to homegrown solutions earlier on. Do you have confidence that the Nigerian security agent or the Nigerian military, however way it is, will be able to handle this issue of terrorism locally and stamp it out? Do you have that confidence?
Unfortunately, no. I do have confidence in them 100% that they are doing a great job. But terrorism is a global threat. So they need to deal with it, working with their other partners. But what the military have not done today is tap into the resource of their experts that are abroad. I remember telling Mr. President that, Mr. President, do you know that you have more than 1,000 Nigerians that work within the security sector in the UK alone? I'm not talking of Germany, I'm not talking of Belgium, I'm not talking of the United States. I'm talking of Nigerians that are involved, as I speak today, taking footprint of criminals. I'm talking of Nigerians that are advising the Prime Minister as we speak on terrorism, putting together all these statistics. Nigerians in civil service, Nigerians in the UK police, Nigerians in MI5, believe it, yes, Nigerians are there. And some of them I know that some of them have gone on tours to Afghanistan. They've done things that people like me would be shaking in my boots to talk about, even though I count myself as somebody privileged to have worked in this field, yet I still salute those people. So why is it those people are sitting down there and we're not tapping into it? Are you telling me that Israel will know that they have somebody in the UK that has a solution to their problem and they will not fly an helicopter in and pick that? And when I told Mr. President, he said we'll look into it. Of course, when it comes in, the people around him might have, changed his mind or whatever. That's understandable. But I hope this new president coming in, who is a civilian, will think differently from the military, from the former general, and try to infuse civilians into it, and continue to use the good work of the military, because the military are doing a good job. Please, I salute them. But the fact is that they cannot do it alone. They need other people. Every little helps in order to ensure peace and prosperity of Nigerians.
Now, a former chief of army staff, Futuku Buratai, had said that Nigeria will most likely continue to suffer terrorist attacks for the next 20 years. Now, you have mentioned so many solutions that we should look into. The question is, if we don't do that, how much longer are we going to be dealing with this matter? And if we do, how quickly will that resolve our challenges?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think Burata owes me a copyright on that, because I said it first on your channel many years ago, and I still have that video saying that Nigeria will have to deal with terrorism over a period of 20 years. But unfortunately, I can't actually stand by that word again that Nigeria will be able to resolve terrorism in 20 years, because then it was terrorism started in Nigeria roughly around 2009. So I was projecting that terrorism will be resolved in Nigeria by 2029 if we put in all the parameters. But I am confident that if this president is willing to do some of the initiatives that I've highlighted and he plays this video again, he could get rid of terrorism in 4 years. And when I say get rid of terrorism, I mean it will only be a snapshot of attacks there and there. Because even in the UK that we're talking about, we still hear of attacks, but the perception of terrorism is very, very low because people know that things will be done. How could I or Elisha believe that they will be kidnapped, adopted by these criminals, these animals, and yet my president will leave me in that place for 5-6 years and head will not roll? Not one single person have lost their job. Yet Elisha has been in there and given birth to 2 children in captivity, and she doesn't want to be there. That is where it's different. That is where the difference is. Because if Mr. President is really serious and is doing what he needs to do, even if we are still rolling out some of these figures, people will come up and put their hands on the chest and say, we know that Asiwaju is doing what he needs to do to get rid of terrorism, and they can see it physically happening. But where there is a lukewarm approach to this, then Nigerians will not be happy, and the perception of terrorism will continue to be higher and higher, which is one of the reasons why we are where we are. We need to change our approach. We need to look at multi-approach to deal with it. And it's not just what Temitope Olodo is saying, it's what other people have said on this platform, it's what you, Mr. Mike, have been asking, questions that you've been asking day in, day out, and people have been giving those solutions on live for all Nigerians to hear. And that is why in the public view, Nigeria can't deal with terrorism except they take some of those ideas and initiatives that many people have said on this platform, take them on board and use them, and for people to see with their eyes that these things are being deployed.
All right. Just quickly before we go, we've often known that when it comes to military contracts, it's quite lucrative that so many people have interest and have eyes on it. As much as it is also done in a very discreet way, but some people have come to have concerns with the way that sometimes the contracts go and so much money is invested into it, and then you don't get the commensurate result at the end of the day, and so on. Would you advise more of a government-to-government kind of contract to cut off a lot of middlemen and so on? Does that help better than the kind of contracting that we do sometimes?
They are being purchased for the rail. It's not necessary. What we rather would have needed is to put people on the boots. And imagine if you put 2,000 Nigerians on those routes, you don't need to pay up to 2 billion or the amount that they will spend, for what they want to spend it for. There will be more Nigerians recruited and they will have done the job. But with all this contract money, a lot of kickback will have gone into it. If you look at those equipment that they said they purchased, go online and put the names there and look at how much they are actually selling it and how much Nigerian government is buying it for. That is where you know what the real corruption is in some of these security agreements. It's a lucrative business, and that's the reason why most of them have their teeth inside it, and they don't want other people inside it. I'm hoping that this president will change that scenario and allow that we do strategic purchasing and strategic deployment, because that's the only way we'll be able to resolve terrorism and violence extremism challenges in Nigeria.
Temitope Olodo, Preventive Terrorism Consultant and President of Africa Security Forum, thank you for your time on the program.
Thank you for